West Wing, Sports Night, The Newsroom, The Social Network, Moneyball. Wait, Moneyball? Really? Huh. The Trial of the Chicago 7, and that Steve Jobs biopic no one watched. He's the creator of some of the best Democratic dream worlds and the king of the walk and talk. It's Aaron Sorkin. But there's one more of Sorkin's babies that isn't talked about as often. It's one that, compared to Sports Night's 4 seasons and The West Wing 7, only lasted a single season and even suffered a hiatus in the middle. It's actually my personal favorite, despite being hella problematic and possibly the closest thing to fantasy that Sorkin has ever written in any of his walk and talk heavy shows. I'm talking about Hi, I'm Upside Up. Welcome to my channel. Welcome to my very first real video. And because I don't know how to take things slowly, this is going to be a retrospective on Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, the third of Aaron Sorkin's 4 cult hit TV shows. But before we dive into the dive-in, let's look at a quick overview. Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip first aired in 2006. The premise is pretty simple. A weekly sketch comedy show, a la Saturday Night Live, has fallen out of favor with audiences as it nears its 20th anniversary. And following a network-style explosion from the showrunner, a former writer and producer are brought back in to bring the funny, while raising ratings and spreading a little bit of democratic Americana along the way. The 22-episode series stars the lovely and recently departed Matthew Perry, who you might recognize from Friends, this, or as Benny in Fallout New Vegas.
Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.
Perry plays Matt Albee, the showrunner and head writer. Also starring is Bradley Whitford, who Sorkin had worked with on The West Wing playing my hero, Josh Lyman.
You should get a picture of that, because that's going to be the moment you're finished in democratic politics. President Bartlett's a good man. He's got a good heart. He doesn't hold a grudge. That's what he pays me for.
Whitford plays Danny Tripp, the show's head producer and also showrunner. Matt and Danny are a pair, working together like Sorkin and his frequent director Thomas Schlamme, Steven Spielberg and David Koepp, or Steven Spielberg and John Williams. Hey, do you ever wonder if John Williams and David Koepp have hung out like separately, or if they need Steven Spielberg to be like their glue friend? Is that a thing? Also starring in this ensemble cast are Amanda Peet as Jordan McDear, the president of the fictional network NBS on which the show is broadcast. Steven Weber plays Jack Rudolph, chairman of NBS, who appears just enough to make you wonder what a chairman of a network does. Moving into the cast of the show inside the show, we have Nate Cordry, D.L. Hughley, Sarah Paulson, and Timothy Busfield. The 4 play actors Tom Jeter, Simon Stiles, Harriet Hayes, and the show's director Cal Shanley, respectively. Fans of The West Wing might remember Timothy Busfield as Danny Concannon, CJ's love interest with more zaddy energy than a journalist should be allowed to have. Fans of American Horror Story will recognize Sarah Paulson from That Scary Show, which I've never watched, and fans of Firefly will recognize her as the scientist who gets eaten by Reavers. Comedian D.L. Hughley is perhaps best known from his stand-up or his sitcom, and I think he could be the new host of The Daily Show if nobody minds. I don't know. Nate Cordry did a good job in this, and he was in The New Girl, but did not play the new girl, so I don't know what he did. Amanda Peet was in 2012 and The Whole 9 Yards. Did you know that Matthew Perry made a bet with Bruce Willis about the success of The Whole 9 Yards, which is the reason why Bruce Willis guest starred on a few episodes of Friends? No, you have ADHD. Steven Weber was the principal in 13 Reasons Why, the show that proved Netflix will take a chance with anything. Weber, I think, is uniquely cast because he has that Caucasian male timbre that always makes me think he's going to fire me. Hopefully that's enough of a jog of the memory to stop you from asking yourself where you've seen this actor or that one, and you can continue listening. Studio 60 lasted only 22 episodes and debuted the same year as 30 Rock, the Tina Fey NBC love child about the showrunner of a fictional show inside a show, and it's pretty much the same as this, only with a comedic spin. While Studio 60 would last only 22 episodes, 30 Rock continued on despite rocky ratings and lasted a full 7 seasons. While there are probably a few points to compare and contrast, I'm not going to do that in this video. I don't want to sit and talk about what 30 Rock did right or what Studio 60 could have done wrong, because I don't think the success or relative failure of either series can be broken down so easily. Both shows are incredibly funny to different audiences, both shows have some very problematic aspects, and both shows came at similar premises from very different directions. Besides, that would force me to watch 30 Rock again, and I read Bossy Pants. I've done my time. Really, I just want to talk about Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip. I want to talk about what the series was, give people a peek into it to help them decide whether or not they'd like to watch it, and provide a bit of background noise for people who are vaguely interested in Aaron Sorkin, TV, Matthew Perry, or whoever else the analytics recommends this to. I'll start with the pilot by itself, and if I have more to say, which, let's face it, I always do, I'll continue through the retrospective with a few select episodes and give a little overview of the ones I don't get into too much detail with. With all that said, let's fall down. The first episode starts us just before the beginning of an airing of the show, and it introduces us to terms that the series is going to use, like VTR or videotape recording, cold open, which is the beginning of an episode. To put it in SNL perspective, think of the first sketch you see, which leads into Live from New York. That's the cold open. We're also going to introduce S&P, Standards and Practices. I'll mostly call them standards. It's easier to say. For those of you who may not know, standards are the people whose job it is to enforce the rules set forth by the FCC on what things may or may not be broadcast, which is particularly important on a live TV show. Our introduction comes with the standards guy arguing with current showrunner Wes Mendel, played by Judd Hirsch. I would love to talk more about the standards guy as a character because he devours the scenery, but he shows up in this episode and in one more, and he's really a non-character. He hates Cal. He tries to get Cal fired. He fails because Timothy Busfield's name is in the opening credits and his name isn't. However, the discussion he's having with Wes is serious. It's about control. The idea that a showrunner actually controls what appears on their show, should they want to air something that flies in the face of United States standards and practices. That's kind of an overarching theme of this series, that there's an ongoing battle between art and government. And we're going to see more of that in a moment. Wes's argument with the standards guy is over the airing of a sketch, which seems to be remarkably popular with test audiences, but flags issues with standards. Standards has a list of words you can't say, but it also has a list of topics which are sensitive for broadcast. Things that would upset audiences and cause them to contact the network. The latter is what this sketch seems to entail. After giving up at first and changing the sketch, Wes has a bit of a breakdown when the show is on the air and does what every protagonist of an Aaron Sorkin TV show does. He gets in trouble for telling the truth. In The West Wing, we had...
None of your business. Look, if 38
No,
states...
well, I can tell you that you don't believe in any God that I pray to, Mr. Lyman. Not any God I pray to.
Lady, the God you pray to is too busy being indicted for tax fraud.
And in Newsroom, it's...
Can you say why America is the greatest country in the world?
The New York Jets.
No, I'm going to hold you to an answer on that. What makes America the greatest country in the world? Why is America
Not the greatest country in the world, Professor. That's my answer.
You're saying...
Yes. There is absolutely no evidence to support the statement that we're the greatest country in the world. We're 7th in literacy, 27th in math, 22nd in science, 49th in life expectancy, 178th in infant mortality, 3rd in median household income, number 4 in labor force, and number 4 in exports. We lead the world in only 3 categories: number of incarcerated citizens per capita, number of adults who believe angels are real, and defense spending, where we spend more than the next 26 countries combined, 25 of whom are allies. Now, none of this is the fault of a 20-year-old college student, but you nonetheless are, without a doubt, a member of the worst generation ever. So when you ask what makes us the greatest country in the world, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
And now this. The strange difference is, in both of those, it's the protagonist of the series that makes this mistake, but here, this is the only thing that Wes Mendel does. He's fired in the middle of this episode, and Judd Hirsch doesn't even return in the flashback episodes later in the series. Does this reduce the effect of the speech? Well, let's hear the speech first and then we'll talk about it.
My fellow Americans, I'm here to speak to you tonight about a very serious subject. My legacy. Legacy is a 480 SAT word, which, turns out, does not mean a woman with nice legs, as in Paulazan, primo legacy. No, my friends, legacy means the impact one leaves behind.
Oh, stop this,
Now,
stop
I've
this.
asked my vice president.
Let's stop it, Tom.
Vice President
Can you
Dick
hear
Cheney.
Listen, fellas,
Join
but
me.
we're going to stop it.
Did we lose the feed?
No, we're live. I would like both of you to clear the stage. I don't want anyone to think that you were part of this. You clear the stage. Go on. Go on, go on. This is not going to be a very good show tonight. And I think you should change the channel.
What the
Change
hell?
the channel.
When did they put this
Go ahead, right now.
Does anybody know what the hell's going on?
Or Betty, turn off the TV, okay?
Told him to hold.
No, I know it seems like this is supposed to be funny, but tomorrow you're going to find out that it wasn't, and by that time I'll have been fired. No, this is not. This is not a sketch.
This is real.
You want to go to BTR?
This show used to be cutting-edge political and social satire, but it's gotten lobotomized by a candy-ass broadcast network hell-bent on doing absolutely nothing that might just challenge their audience. We're about to do a sketch that you've seen already about 500 times. Yeah, no one's gonna confuse George Bush with George Plimpton. Now, we get it. We're all being lobotomized by this country's most influential industry that's just thrown in the towel on any endeavor to do anything that doesn't include the courting of 12-year-old boys. And not even the smart 12-year-olds, the stupid ones, the idiots, of which there are plenty, thanks in no small measure to this network. So why don't you just change the channel? Turn off your TVs. Do it right now. Go ahead. No, I get it. This is not a problem.
Get the camera off of him. Put it on what? Cut the boom mic
It's
then.
his show. I take my instructions from him.
Struggle between art and commerce. Well, there's always been a struggle between art and commerce. I mean, now I'm telling you, art is getting its ass kicked. And it's making us mean, and it's making us bitchy. It's making us cheap punks. That's not who we are. People are having contests to see how much they can be like Donald Trump.
Are you bleeping this out?
He hasn't said anything you're not allowed to say.
He's telling people to change the channel.
I don't think you have to worry about anybody changing the channel right now.
Get him off or you don't have a job tomorrow.
I'm running a live national broadcast. Can you threaten me later?
We're eating worms for money. Who wants to screw my sister? Guys are getting killed in a war that's got theme music and a logo. That remote in your hand is a crack pipe. Oh, yeah, every once in a while we pretend to be appalled.
I'm waiting for him to say something that isn't true.
Who else in here knows how to do this?
Talk to my control room.
Get him off.
You got 2 kids in school.
What?
She said you got 2 kids in private school whose father's 5 seconds away from never working again.
Pornographers. It's not even good pornography. They're just this side of snuff films. And friends, that's what's next because that's all that's left.
Cal, come on.
And the 2 things that make them scared gutless are the FCC and every psycho-religious cult that gets positively horny at the very mention of a boycott.
All right, stand by
These are the
VTR.
people that they're
We're gonna
afraid
cut
of.
in early.
It's prissy, feckless, off the charts, greed-filled whorehouse.
There it is.
Network. And you're watching this thoroughly unpatriotic.
Go VTR now!
So a couple things. First, and this is just judging by the standards guy's reaction, I did not know that whorehouse was something you couldn't say on live television. But seriously, both in the studio and in the control booth, you can see how this sets the tone for the entire series. Sorkin wants to have a discussion about the power of government, more important, the power of the religious right to censor art and media. This conversation has been touched on a little bit in The West Wing, which tackled a fair share of conservative control issues. The difference is that took place in an alternate version of America, one that would elect President Bartlett. And Studio 60 takes place in a more our version of America. We can see from the beginning George W. Bush is president. Perhaps more specifically, this takes place in a post-9/11 world. Not only that, but this takes place in 2006 when post-9/11 still kind of meant something. Jon Stewart was giving us daily coachings on how to live through this weird onslaught of nationalism dressed in Support Our Troops bumper stickers, and it would still be a few years before SNL put big ears on Fred Armisen and called it an Obama impression. For those of you that may not recall, or thanks to YouTube algorithms, may not have been alive during this era, what Wes is saying isn't wrong. If you think that there's a patriot versus liberal skew to American media now, this was the heavy genesis. Following 9/11, it was taboo to mention any of the huge mistakes that Bush had been making because he happened to be president during the tragedy, and he wasn't completely pulling a Trump with it. There was specific music to herald in updates in the war on Afghanistan, and we put the American flag under network logos. It was propaganda for us to receive information about how good our troops were doing. We were expected to cheer as lives were lost. In 2004, things had started to change, and by 2006, the floodgates had been opened, and it was okay to make jokes about Bush on network television again. But this isn't new television. When a joke starts on network television, it doesn't stop. Think about how many times you've seen someone doing a Donald Trump impression on late night in the last 6 years. It's fine. It's funny. But it's only when it's safe to do these things, when the ratings will allow it, and when the responses will be negligible. When it's safe. That's why Cal cut off when he did. You could be an awful TV show. You could be an awful TV show on an awful network, but it was still verboten to be unpatriotic. In many respects, it still is, but we get around that by now redefining what patriotic is. I'm going to move on before this becomes about that. Now, this brings us to what you might call the thesis of Wes's speech, the writing in the episode, and maybe the type of television you see recently in general. Recently here means 2006, but I think a lot of people would argue that it also means the year of me writing this, 2024. It's not very good, is what he says. It's repetitive, it's lowest common denominator, and it's brutish. And that's another thing that Studio 60 is going to try to change in its next iteration, which is something we'll see starting from episode 2 in a big way. Before the speech, I asked you to think about whether Wes getting fired reduces the impact of the speech he gave. And I'll give my 2 cents. I think it empowers it. I think it gives permission to people like Jordan and Matt and Danny to overhaul the show and attempt to bring it to a new cultural standard. But it asks the question of whether or not that's something the world wants. Whether or not you believe it, I think anyone who's even marginally familiar with The West Wing or any of Sorkin's other works can agree that he definitely believes this. Sorkin writes dialogue for literary majors, which is why I love it. He writes worlds where everyone is eager to listen to everyone else's thesis statements, where everyone is in love with conversation and thinking, and it's fiction. And Studio 60 lives in that same universe, where people want to be heard, but they're also interested in listening, which is where it breaks from reality, and that may have caused the disconnect with audiences. In fact, this is one of those points of contention that critics had with the show. One former SNL writer, whose name I still haven't tracked down, which I say like I'm going to find that person and interview him, I just like having good sources. Anyway, that writer says that SNL doesn't write to be smart or educate, it writes to be funny first. And completely misses the point that Sorkin is asking, why can't we do both? The last thing of note is this. As I very briefly mentioned in the beginning, the inspiration for this speech comes from a movie called Network, written by a famous screenwriter named Paddy Chayefsky. Sorkin is on record for saying, quote, "No predictor of the future, not even Orwell, has ever been as right as Chayefsky was when he wrote Network." Quote. Safe to say he's a fan. Now, partially because it's relevant, and partially because it's just really good cinema, I want to show the original scene that Wes Mendel's speech is compared to, both in-universe and out. This is the original Mad as Hell speech from 1974's Network.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. It's a depression. Everybody's out of work or scared of losing their job. The dollar buys a nickel's worth. Banks are going bust. Shopkeepers keep a gun under the counter. Punks are running wild in the street, and there's nobody anywhere who seems to know what to do, and there's no end to it. We know the air is unfit to breathe and our food is unfit to eat. We sit watching our TVs while some local newscaster tells us that today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. It's like everything everywhere is going crazy, so we don't go out anymore. We sit in the house, and slowly the world we're living in is getting smaller, and all we say is, please, at least leave us alone in our living rooms. Let me have my toaster and my TV and my steel-belted radios, and I won't say anything. Just leave us alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone. I want you to get mad. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to riot. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. God damn it. My life has value. So, I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. I want you to get up right now. Get up, go to your windows, open them, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. Things have got to change.
How many stations does this go out?
You've got to get mad.
67.
Say,
I know it goes to Louisville and Atlanta.
I'm not going to take this anymore. Then we'll figure out what to do about the depression and the inflation and the oil crisis. But first, get up out of your chairs, open the window, stick your head out and yell, and say, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
Who are you talking to, Herb?
CGG, Atlanta.
Are they yelling in Atlanta, Herb?
Are they yelling in Atlanta, Ted?
But first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
They're yelling in Baton Rouge.
Get up, get up, get up out of your...
Son of a bitch! We struck the mother lode!
Stick your head out of the window, open it, then stick your head out and keep yelling and yell, I'm as mad as hell, I'm not going to take this anymore. Just get up from your chairs right now. Go to the window.
Where are you going?
I want to see if anybody's
Go
yelling.
to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell and keep yelling. I'm mad as hell! I'm not going to take this anymore!
It's important to note this. Network is satire. The entire film is a satire of the fact that television networks will do anything to get ratings. This explains the excitement that the network executive has at people actually getting up and yelling. In real life, it's never a good thing when the TV asks you to get up. Studio 60 is taking a more realistic approach, which is why Cal said no one had to worry about changing the channel. People don't look away from train wrecks. And it's why Wes gets fired. In a more realistic approach towards this, the network doesn't have to call people. It's the other way around, which is why we directly see what happens at a dinner party welcoming Jordan McDear to NBS.
Thank you very much, Mr. White. And thank you, Jack and Marilyn, for hosting this wonderful party. I also wanted to thank the caterers. Oh, I didn't...
The woman said this was important.
Oh. Excuse me. I'm sorry. It's from my assistant. Something's happened at Studio 60. Could I use your phone?
Yeah, sure. It's in the office.
Can't be that big a deal. Nothing bad's gonna happen on my first day, right?
Once, on my first day at a job, they had forgotten that I was supposed to start that day, and no one had anything for me to do, nor did I have a computer or a desk there for the first 3 hours. They just kind of gave me a really extended tour of the building, and 3 days later, they all went on a camping trip without me, and I was the only one there to watch the entire office. It was pretty weird. Still, I think Jordan's first day is worse. When you're in a room of important people and everyone's phones start ringing at the same time, your stock prices are about to change. So Jack Rudolph and Jordan visit the set to assess the situation and give Wes a quick firing. The standards guy is horny for firing Cal, but he's not going to get to, so we'll move on. It's a quick character note that Jordan is interested in talking to Wes before making any decisions. It's clear that Wes is going to get fired, but that's not what she jumps to. She wants to know about the sketch. Jack just fires him.
Wesley?
Yeah.
You're fired.
No kidding.
Back at NBS headquarters in an evening that is just racking up the miles if you think about it, Jordan cuts off a veritable war room meeting to stop everyone at NBS from freaking out and takes over the situation. In a conversation with Jack, she reveals a plan to bring Matt Albee and Danny Tripp to replace Wes Mendel, while Jack manages to threaten her job for the first time in the series while advocating for her at the same time. It becomes clear through this conversation that Jack Rudolph has... Why did I say his last name again? It becomes clear through this conversation that Jack has a history with Matt and Danny, although it remains vague and yet menacing for the time being. I'll point out here that a recurring bit is introduced. Something is up with Jordan's office. In every episode where Jordan's office is mentioned, something's going to be wrong with it. For this time, it's just that she doesn't know where it is, but later her phones don't work. It's getting sprayed for bed bugs, a bunch of weird things that I think are just hilarious. Good little writing points by Sorkin. But with the conversation finished with Jack, Jordan ventures off to contact Matt and Danny. And now that their names have been mentioned, they can be properly summoned, and we are introduced to our protagonists with a bang.
Whoa. Sorry. That was strange. I'm sorry. You okay? Yeah. I'm on some medication right now that I guess makes me not know where chairs are.
He means he's on back medication.
Yeah.
How'd you hurt your back?
It happened when a surgeon sliced it open with a knife.
He had back surgery a few days ago.
You're on Vicodin?
Yeah, I may have exceeded the recommended dosage.
Should you be out of bed this soon?
I play with pain.
Well, they haven't gotten to your category yet. They're doing the awards between courses this year.
Where's your wife?
Sitting right next to her husband. I was just talking to you.
Sure.
Matt has recently received back surgery and is loopy from drugs, something that is going to come back later in this episode and a few others. That's actually something to note rather than just a chance to let Matthew Perry practice his pratfalls. As Matt discusses his recent breakup with Harriet Hayes, according to Matt, he made a joke about her getting a standing ovation while singing the national anthem, which caused them to break up. It is consensus that it was wrong to do this. It is my opinion that this was a dumb joke. Amidst this, and explaining the fancy regalia, he wins an award from the WGA, the Writers Guild of America. I think that this is supposed to solidify the career trajectory of Matt and Danny, as accepting an award from the WGA is indeed a prestigious event. But, and this could be my opinion, it's a very inside baseball prestigious event. You and I understand he won an Oscar, they won an Emmy. Those are plain folk awards. WGA awards are great for the people in the know, but I think some people would have been equally impressed if he'd won Best Pickup in his class for J.D. Power and Associates. Anyway, he wins an award, which we understand is a very good thing. Unfortunately, the moment is interrupted as Matt and Danny's assistant informs Danny that Wes went network. Danny abandons Matt to see it for himself, played as funny, and since this is 2006, they have to find a hotel room to watch the VCR recording. God, I'm old. Now, for those of you who are astute, you may be aware that now we've mentioned another character, and it is in fact time for their introduction. Harriet doesn't get her own full scene, but instead, more of her character is revealed in sharing it with Cal, then Simon, and Tom. Avoiding questions about the cut sketch that set Wes off and being ushered into the after party, Harriet takes a second to lament with Cal, who, following the 53-second delay before cutting off Wes's tirade, is certain that he's going to be fired. This is not without merit, as going against standards during a live broadcast is akin to telling your boss's boss that his ideas are butt and he belongs on Butt Island. I'm bad at metaphors. Harriet promises to share his fate, giving us a sense of what a kind individual she is. And then she moves away from the blue lit corner onto the part of the party. Squashing the rumor that it wasn't the national anthem that caused her to break up with Matt, she avoids any other questions and instead chooses to summon Simon and Tom in defense mode and exit stage left. She's stopped by another rookie cast member, Dylan Killington, played by Nate Torrance. This is perhaps one of the most out-of-character introductions for any of the cast, as Dylan stops her to ask why her pre-show prayers didn't work. The duty of this scene seems to be to impress upon the viewers that Harriet is Christian and strong in her faith, but all it does is make Dylan look like an asshole, and it dowers the first impression of his character. I can't imagine a first-year rookie taking a chance talking like this and then keeping their job. Maybe I'm not great at imagining people. Eagle-eyed viewers may have also noticed Simon Helberg, who plays Alex Dwyer, another ensemble cast member. Thankfully, he's less of a creep in this show than he is in The Big Bang Theory. That's really all there is to know about him, but he has some good one-liners, so it's good for him. Anyway, back to the important three. After talking a little bit more about the sketch that was cut, we're given insight into the level of writing for the sketch, and it's apparently better than anything the sketch has had since Matt and Danny quit. Unfortunately, mid-conversation, the cast is called back to the set where they assume it's time for the show's cancellation. Little do they know, as we do, that Jordan is scheming. We meet back with Jordan as she meets Danny for the first time with some very light flirting before inviting him and Matt to take over for Wes. Danny puts up a wall of rejection, starting with needing Wes's blessing, something that Jordan assures him that he has, before informing him that they're about to start production on a film. Jordan reveals her trap card, and that's the second Yu-Gi-Oh reference in the video. There's going to be a third. Jordan reveals her trap card and explains that she knows that Danny has failed a drug test recently and isn't able to be insured for the film. He won't be able to direct it. I'm going to take a minute to pause here and shine a little bit of light on this one, because this might be a trigger warning for anyone who's contemplating watching the series. Both Matt and Danny are going to have issues with drugs throughout the series, although Danny's are all behind him. Now, there is some basis in reality for this. As recently as 2001, Sorkin was arrested with psychedelic mushrooms, marijuana, and cocaine on his person. So when he writes about things like this, we can all believe that there's a little bit of wisdom behind the experience. For Danny, it's treated as escaping a looming shadow, and I think Whitford nails that darkness every time. It's the kind of acting that you rarely see on network television, and it's one of the reasons why this is my favorite series. These characters are all built with believable, extensive backstories that sometimes are perfectly understandable and sometimes are frustratingly unbelievable, just like real life. As an aspiring creator myself, one of the things I love seeing is believable battling of demons, because in real life, you don't always win. Real life is filled with stumbles and setbacks. Danny reveals that he hadn't told Matt about the drug tests yet, meaning he's been hiding the fact that they wouldn't be able to make the movie in order to not sour the WGA awards. Or maybe just not telling him out of cowardice. Cowardice of not wanting to tell his best friend that he'd relapsed. Yet, when he does tell Matt, Matt shows us why they're best friends.
I mean, you have to get somebody else. I took my insurance physical a week ago, and I tested positive for cocaine. I need 18 months of clean tests before I can get a completion bond. All right. Okay, are you all right? Yeah, I'm fine. Okay, wait, Matt, I'll bond you. What? I'll pay for the bond. How much money do you have? Well, with my savings and investments and my percentage of the first dollar gross on this movie, $65. Matt.
In the face of a huge setback to their respective careers, his first concern is the well-being of his best friend. Following a short conversation about how they have no other ways to bond Danny, Matt realizes that Jordan came to Danny with this information and assumes what we would all assume from a corporate executive: blackmail.
Excuse me.
Matt, I'm Jordan.
Matt, Albie.
I couldn't be a bigger fan of yours.
Thank you. Matt? You don't have to introduce yourself, Jack. We've met. Are you people using the confidential information that Danny failed a drug test to force him into taking over Studio 60 to deflect attention from what happened on the air tonight?
He failed a drug test?
Yeah, actually, Matt, I was the only one who knew about that. Should have trusted me a little, Danny.
Sorry about that. That one was all me. Yeah. Ironically, I'm the one who's high as a paper kite right now, but legitimately, I had back surgery Tuesday, L5S1, if that means anything to you. Stop talking now? Yeah, you bet.
With the beans properly spilled and truth out in the open, Jack assesses that Matt and Danny are still Matt and Danny, and after failing to intimidate them into taking the job, we uncover that the reason Matt and Danny left was due to the post 9/11 backlash against jokes about Bush. It's implied that liberals are going to liberal, and the show didn't appreciate it in a time of national unity. Nevertheless, because Matt and Danny have hit a wall that will take some time to mount, they will indeed be taking the job. Jack threatens Jordan again before we move on to the showdown we've all been waiting for.
Hi.
What are you doing here?
Danny and I are taking over the show.
You are?
I'm your boss now, so we're gonna have to postpone this fight for a couple of years.
Really?
Yes.
No, I mean, you're really taking over the show.
Yes.
Or we could just end it now. The fight.
That'd be fine, too.
First of all, could you stop telling people we broke up because of the national anthem? It makes me sound like an idiot.
Actually, consensus is it makes me sound like an idiot.
Well, be that as it may, and truer words were never spoke. Please stop it.
Here we see that Matt and Harriet didn't break up because of the national anthem, but because Harriet released a spiritual album and performed on Pat Robertson's show, The 700 Club, in order to advertise it. Matt got cold and distant, so Harriet broke up with him. For those of you who may not know, Pat Robertson was, it feels really good to be able to say Pat Robertson was. He is past tense. Pat Robertson was a controversial figure in Baptist leadership. I don't want this video to become about that, but you can get a taste of what I mean here. And here. It's safe to say that Matt wasn't upset about the album. What he was upset about was the which she chose to advertise it. This is also the first little hint we'll get to Harriet maybe not being the best Christian, or Harriet being the exact type of Christian that Sorkin somehow manages to write. We've seen before how Sorkin feels about people who put the word of God before godly acts.
I wanted to ask you a couple of questions while I had you here. I'm interested in selling my youngest daughter into slavery, as sanctioned in Exodus 21:7. She's a Georgetown sophomore, speaks fluent Italian, always cleared the table when it was her turn. What would a good price for her be? While thinking about that, can I ask another? My chief of staff, Leo McGarry, insists on working on the Sabbath. Exodus 35:2 clearly says he should be put to death. Am I morally obligated to kill him myself, or is it okay to call the police? Think about those questions, would you? One last thing. While you may be mistaking this for your monthly meeting of the ignorant tight-ass club, in this building when the president stands, nobody sits.
And Harriet will not be spared being one of those types of people. I will note that Aaron Sorkin dated Broadway star and general highlight of media Kristen Chenoweth, who, in 2005, also released a spiritual album for which she performed on the 700 Club. Other people have noted that the relationship between Matt and Harriet mimics the relationship of Sorkin and Chenoweth in other ways, which I personally feel like is skeevy to get into. I will say, however, that with this evidence, I think Matt's joke about getting a standing ovation while singing the national anthem is probably something Sorkin said in real life, and I think that jokes like that go over better if they're performed by Matthew Perry.
If it wasn't because you weren't there, then what did you do to her?
I didn't do anything to her. She said I was great, by the way. I got a standing ovation. And I said very sincerely, Harriet, I'm sure you were great. But it was the national anthem. They were standing already.
Anyway, Matt and Harriet decide that their relationship is not over, but nor will it continue, so they're just going to stay mad at each other for the remainder of the series and make it everyone else's problem. I said a few times that this show is problematic, and I feel like this is one of the most egregious issues. Delving into the personal again, I once broke up with someone with whom I shared the same friend group, and even though we tried to be peaceful, we repeatedly made it everyone else's problem. I can only imagine how much worse it is when everyone includes a national broadcast television show. Maybe, dear viewer, if you're thinking of doing something similar, don't. And yet, this is another thing that I love about the show. You don't stop loving someone just because circumstances change, and the necessity through which we have to live our love and professional lives is rough and sometimes unforgivable. Matt and Harriet sometimes seem to hate being in love with each other, but they are. And I think the performances by Matthew Perry and Sarah Paulson completely play into that. They are absolutely head over heels for each other, and sometimes it seems like it makes them both sick. Just before the episode ends, we find out that the sketch that got cut, the one that made Wes lose it, was called Crazy Christians, and had been written by Matt while he was still working with the show. After another beautiful scene with Matt and Danny once again reassuring each other that they're taking this job, but they're taking it together, the episode ends with one of the best uses of under pressure that I've ever seen. I think every series gets one use of under pressure and you have to use it just right, and Studio 60 definitely does. According to Nielsen ratings, 3 million people decided that this show was not for them. And I, on the other hand, decided that this show would become part of my personality forevermore. So that's the pilot episode of Studio 60. And with that out of the way, with the overview done, I want to talk a little bit about why I really love this show. And maybe we can get to know each other a little better because this is our first time hanging out like this. First, a few things you might be wondering about me. Yes, my voice always sounds like this. No, I'm not much fun at parties, but yes, I go to them anyway. Sometimes. Back to Studio 60. I think I gave a pretty detailed overview of the pilot, and the show honestly only gets better from there. Episode 2 actually contains a musical number that has to be seen to be believed. The writing is clever, enjoyable, and you get a great sense of how the show works as a show. This season also guest stars John Goodman in an Emmy Award-winning role, playing a judge named Bobby Beebe. I have to recommend that. As well as Eli Wallach as a former writer who was blacklisted during the Red Scare. If you're a lover of American media or history, or the history of American media in any context, these are things you don't want to miss. Sorkin nails the devil in the details with small things like this. Let me take a moment to single out one of the biggest draws here because I don't want it to be understated. Matthew Perry's acting matches perfectly with the way that Aaron Sorkin writes. His clean delivery of snarky, quick material finds a home here with Sorkin's rapid-fire style of quips and references. Those of you who know Josh Lyman know that Bradley Whitford is capable of knocking it out of the park with Sorkin's writing too, but we get to see a different side of Whitford's skills here. He falls in love mid-season, and it's honestly charming to see how puppy-doggish he gets while retaining Danny's clear persistence and general cold facade. Again, there are some problematic aspects, but if you can remind yourself that this is fiction and in no way imitatable, it's fine to sit back and enjoy. And those are just a handful of things I wanted to mention. The writing, even for just one season, is incredibly tight. A lot of series struggle to find their footing on the first season, and some characters can come off as inconsistent or change drastically from the way they start. Studio 60 is written almost as though it knew it only had a short run, and the characters are already established, which makes them believable. It leaves enough loose ends to make a believable world, but the series doesn't end with a cliffhanger or with unsatisfying open ends like many unfortunate first season cancellations. I would love to talk more about why the series was canceled because I think it's a really interesting insight into how network television worked, and it led into how streaming shows work now, but I think I'll save that for another day. And I want to know your thoughts. This is the call to action. If you've seen the show, what did you think? If not, did I sway you? Leave a comment and give me a like. It tells the giant computer machine that I did a good job. But for now, as you and I both know, no deep dive can last forever. I'm glad you fell upside up with me. It's the best way to fall down.